My name is Keju, and I'm from the Marshall Islands, and I'm currently pursuing my graduate studies in urban and regional planning, focusing on community development and community participation in village planning. Kwajalein Atoll is currently being used and has been used by the U.S. military to use the island for missile testing, and the whole region of Micronesia is very strategic important to U.S. The military use of Kwajalein, they're using the island for testing missiles that is shoot out from Vandenberg, California, and intercepting that missile in the sky. And there are out of 100 islands on Kwajalein Atoll, there are 11 of them that are currently being used as a station, stationing satellites and other technology to use that for military purpose. They have moved all the people from these islands that are significant to the testing, move all of them into an island called Ebi, which is less than 100 acre of land. And when I was growing up, there was more than 10,000 people living on the island of Ebi, which is only 3 miles away south from Kwajalein headquarters station where the testing takes place. And currently there are more than 10,000 people live there, and it's been a real problem for us. Population growth has really boomed, and we have a lot of youth problem among pregnancy and other urbanization related problems that Marshallese have faced in the years past. There were 67 U.S. nuclear bomb testing that took place in the Marshalls in the 40s and in the 50s. And the health effect that has taken place in our islands has been very, very horrific result because of the testing. And people have suffered immensely. We had a lot of childbirth defect. We have babies that are born like jellyfish and other kind of defect among children that it's really difficult to describe as human. In my family, my father died of breast cancer, and we believe that it was related to the exposure of radiation resulting from the bomb testing that took place in 1940s and 1950s. Including with my father was my sister, Darlene Keju Johnson, who suffered from the illness of breast cancer. Currently, my mother has suffered breast cancer as well and is currently going under treatment for breast cancer. And one older brother of mine who also is suffering or going under treatment for thyroid, including an older sister. And since we've lost my father and my sister, we've taken the issue of nuclear exposure among our family members very seriously. And we want to let the people know that Marshall Islands history with nuclear age it draws a very painful picture. And it is important for us to speak out because we've suffered and had pain over these years, and it's really important that we let the world know, and the world owes it to us to listen. Micronesia consists of Republic of the Marshall Islands, which lies on the eastern part of Micronesia, and then you have the Federal State of Micronesia, which comprises of countries or states within FSM that are Kostrai, Chuuk, Ponape, Yap, and then on the westernmost part of Micronesia is Republic of Palau. And if you can think of geographically locating the Marshall Islands, it's basically halfway between the Hawaiian Islands and Australia. Colonial militarism has to do with domination of military within Micronesia and the military activities impacting the lives of people in Micronesia, particularly the Marshall Islanders. And when I say military colonial or colonial militarism, has to do with the life condition, economic condition, all tied into this quadrillion missile range in the Marshall Islands, and how it's changing economics, changing the way people interact within families, changing of family values, changing of cultural values because of that domination, because of this colonial militarism. And because of that, we have a domination of the wishes and demand of the military policy within the area, which affect our lives. And that goes along with people depending on the military services for income and for social activity within the Marshalls, which has basically changed our lives. The health and the environment of Marshallese has a really interesting history tied to military domination in the Marshalls, particularly from the bombing of Bikini and Eniwetok, and has basically displaced a lot of our people, not within the areas throughout the Marshalls, but we've seen migration flow of Marshallese, of Bikini and Eniwetok people and all the others because of this displacement. We have seen them migrating outside of the Marshalls. After the test, the environmental quality of the Marshalls, especially in Bikini, Eniwetok, now Woodruck, Rongelap, Jamo Island, Arno, and most of the atolls throughout the Marshalls have been affected indeed. We certainly know that because of the health of the people, but at the same time, we can also see it in our environment. Bikini is off limit for human habitation forever, except for maybe conducting scientific research that is now being staged in Bikini. Eniwetok for sure is not, the certain part of Eniwetok is not habited by any people because of radiation and because of its poison. Fishing and doing all the agriculture activities in the Marshalls is very limited, especially in these two atolls. Especially Bikini and Eniwetok, we're not able to do that. Rongelap as well is not, we're not able to plant our own food because of the poisoning in our soil. So there has been planned recently to reestablish or resettle the people of Rongelap, for example, but with the idea that people will not be able to plant the food there. Every food item has to be imported to the atoll. And fishing, for sure, is out of the question. The water is poisoned because of the importation of food from outside. High rate of diabetes and other illnesses have gone up, and malnutrition among children is very common all throughout Micronesia, not just this, all throughout Marshalls, not just the affected atoll, but it's been a pattern all through Marshalls, and it's a very, very, very shocking finding. Because of military practice in the area, it's been very important for America to strategically locate their military station, just as in Kwajalein. And because of that, we have seen a lot of urbanization in the two district urban district, namely Majuro and Kwajalein. And because of the urbanization, you have seen a lot of pattern of migration from the outer islands to these two atolls in search of employment, in search of other amenities available in this area. And it has affected us socially, not only socially, yeah, well, within socially is family. Family values have been undermined. And because the family values are being undermined, we don't see cultural practice that are normally handed down from the previous generation to the next generation. And I'm talking especially about fishing, father taking the son going fishing, and the daughter with the mother and the aunts in the village to weave or making mats or preparing food. These are being more and more increasingly undermined because of urbanization and because of life situation, life pattern in which people have changed over the years. And militarism and the change in life because of westernization has changed everything from diet to cultural practice. And we see that slowly moving away from our society. Darlene Keju Johnson is a rare breed among her own people, simply because she was not afraid to speak out about a topic that was very close to her heart, because it affected not only her personally and her family, but also because of the Marshallese people in general. And she spoke out, one of the very first Marshallese to speak out against the nuclear age and against U.S. being lying to the Marshallese people about their rate of exposure, and basically coming out and saying the truth and saying the fact about what happened to her people, namely the Bikinian and Eniwetok and people that have been ignored by the U.S. government to compensate them. So she was one of the first Marshallese women to speak out against this kind of relationship that we have with the American government. And then because of that, she was very influential, and she was very well known in the island to speak on this topic, and was not afraid to speak about the fact, and went on a world tour to tell the story to the world about the Marshallese who have been cheated and who have been used as she said, as an animal or guinea pigs to be studied upon, and basically just presenting the fact. And because of that kind of activity, and because of that kind of activism that she lived, she was very well known among her own people, and a lot of young people really looked up to her because of that charisma attitude that she had, as well as her willing to speak and her skill of speaking in front of a public and speak about these issues was really a boost to the young people in the Marshalls. Darlene Keju Johnson advocated for the victims of nuclear victims back in the 1980s, simply because a lot of them were being ignored by the U.S. government for compensating the people, justly. And since then, they have been compensation have been rewarded to the people substantially. And so within the Compact of Free Association, there has been funds set aside to compensate the people. But recently we've had increased rates in thyroid cancer, breast cancer, cervical cancer, and all other kind of related illness that are now increasing in the Marshall Islands. So within the Compact of Free Association, there is a clause in there that says change in circumstance, which stands for the fact that if Marshall Islanders are able to prove and provide some evidence to show that these illnesses have occurred and have increased because related to the bomb testing, then they would be able to negotiate the increase in compensation for the people with the U.S. government. So Currently, under the renegotiation of the compact, the change of circumstance has become a very hot topic on the agenda to increase the compensation for the people. So that's where we're at right now in terms of compensation. Darlene Keju Johnson died because of breast cancer, stemming from nuclear exposure. And although she faced a lot of pain and a lot of suffering during the battle stage of her sickness, she held it very privately. Operation Homecoming occurred in 1982, and I was a sophomore in high school, and it was basically a protest by the landowners of Kwajalein because they felt that U.S. government was not paying sufficiently. A lot of our people were protesting peacefully. When I say peacefully, they sat down in protest and actually went on the site on these islands, including Kwajalein, the main island, and sat down and camped in these areas. And a lot of our landowners, in Kwajalein, Marshallese, were beaten and were arrested by both the Marshallese government police, national police, as well as military police. And it was a very sad moment to see. The outcome of that protest was that the landowners were able to receive, including CADA, Kwajalein Kwajalein Atoll Development Authority. It was like a Kwajalein local government for the Marshallese on Kwajalein, were able to receive compensation that was, at that moment or at that time in history, was fair to them, with a $13 million settlement of land rental for Kwajalein directly to the landowners. The Compact of Free Association is a bilateral agreement between the U.S. government and the Marshall Island government, which would give the Marshall Islands rights to migrate to the United States freely, to work, right for employment, and receiving other benefit in the U.S. And then the American government would then assume the right and control for the whole region of the Marshall Islands, and would have the rights to deny a third-party superpower to be in the area. So it basically gives the strategic importance of the area to the United States in exchange for aid and other benefit that the United States could give us. After World War II, when America came and took over the whole entire area of Micronesia, then the U.S. was given a blessing from the United Nations to assume control of the area administratively, and the entire area of Micronesia became the Trust Territory of the Pacific Island, TTPI, and the Micronesian nation came together and formed a central government, but under the supervision of U.S. Federal government. And then in 1986, depending on which area of Micronesia you're speaking about, the Marshall Islands in 1986 broke away from this trust territory status and became a sovereign nation and became known as the Republic of the Marshall Islands. And so we still have this 1986 establishment of our own government was done through the Compact of Free Association. Marshallese in general have a mixed feeling about the Compact of Free Association. People are questioning the Compact because in many ways, when we see 15 years after the Compact was signed in 1986, 15 years later, the education, the health and the general well-being of the people is they're not as better off as they ought to be. But politically, we have come to be assumed to be a sovereign nation, which give us the right to join the rest of the United Nations community. Economically, though, it's been a very struggle for all of us. We don't see economic boost or economic building of the islands. You don't see community building going on. Many of the government-based projects were basically from a top-down kind of a attitude of governance, and so a lot of things didn't get done. So economically, we didn't do well as we thought we should be. But politically, in some ways, it did us good. But we have adapted to so many changes within the compact period. We have seen a lot of opposition of low level of radiation waste to be stored in the Marshall, especially among the young people and recent graduates, college graduates, who are more educated. And we hope that more and more Marshallese in that generation become proactive on nuclear issues, because if there's a country out there that should be having a right to say no to nuclear age or nuclear development, it should be the Marshall Islanders. And we're very hopeful and very positive that the younger generation are becoming more aware of it. But we're trying our best, and we should be doing better to mobilize ourselves toward a movement to abolish nuclearism in the Pacific. We've seen a lot of outside support on nuclear issues in the Marshalls, namely Greenpeace. Greenpeace has done wonderfully to support the Marshallese on the struggle against nuclear age. And certainly American Friends Support Committee in Honolulu chapter has been done wonderfully in supporting our cause. And of course, here in San Francisco and Bay Area, I came because of, again, the movement toward abolishing nuclearism. And we'd like to continue that. We'd like to see that more and more, to have outside organization to carry on the issue and who share the same kind of concern and issues of justice for Marshallese people. And that's really encouraging to see outside organization supporting our cause and supporting the Marshallese people for resettlement, for compensating us, and to become more aware of what the issue is. National missile defense. The rationale behind it is that it should protect U.S., its allies, and its forces abroad. But I see the technology behind NMD as the advanced stage of nuclearism coming back in our time. And anything that has to do with nuclear age or nuclear development, I'm certainly going to be opposed for it, because it's another level of it that is going to be destroying not just Marshall Island and the people that are being tested and are hosting the test, but it has a very deadly, destructive force that is 100 times more powerful than what we've seen in our history, and it's inhumane to take people's life massively. We see that among Pikinian and Eniwetok, and the result of that bombing, test bombing in the islands, and how it's affected human life. So we should be opposing it. And Marshallese should be the first one to actually stand up and say no more nuclear development, no more advanced stage of nuclearism. The environmental degradation that has occurred, particularly on Bikini and Eniwetok. For example, in Eniwetok, there is this ruined island that it has a dome over it. On one island that is, ruined, It has a cement that has been covered the area where the bomb blew off the island, and it is very unsafe for any human being to within the area. And what is so dangerous about that is we don't have recent studies as far as how the dome has been, or the area has been protected. Is it leaking? We've heard report that is the cement or the concrete has a crack on it already, and we've had previous storms in the islands, and we're very concerned about how the storm affected the environment, and because of the storm, how the area has been affected by the environment has been affected by the dome, and other areas within the atoll that is off limit because of poisoning. Vandenberg Air Force Base shoot out the missiles, and we have an interceptor from Kwajalein that meet 140 miles up in the sky at the current technology that they're using, and intercept the incoming missile from Vandenberg Air Force Base. What do you do when you have to have running water, you have to feed your family, and the only way to do that is to work on Kwajalein? You're not going to be really want to bother with the issue. But I believe that they're educated. If Marshallese people have become more educated on the military role in the area in relating to nuclear age and nuclear development and missile program, and I think they would be given a second thought and maybe think more about it. People on Ibai, though they've been very resilient, Marshallese are very resilient people. They see the future generation. They see the future generation as kind of sad, because you're stuck on this one island called Ibai, less than 100-acre, with crowded island, and all you do is go to work and come home, and the young people are roaming around the island, and that's about it, and doesn't have much future. I think people are very angry about that they're not able to practice their own way of being a Marshallese on an outer island. Want to practice fishing and other things that they like to do. It's very difficult, and because of that, Marshallese people we know that cultural continuity does not exist, and that's very sad. Civil disobedience is a very effective way of protesting because it's peaceful, and it really expresses how people feel about a particular issue. In this case, it's nuclear development and the NMD development, and it's more effective in such a way that people want to really commit themselves and commit their lives in a peaceful manner, not in a violent way. So I think anything that is non-violent but yet has a strong message behind it, then it's going to be very effective. We've seen it down through the history. Marshallese people in general have that concept within their heart already. And we see that in the protests that took place on Kwajalein, really exhibited those kind of values of protest peacefully. And it was very effective, and I believe it will be, and we ought to continue on that. I believe, as I said earlier, this is not a good idea, not only because it's expensive. We could spend the same amount of money that has been spent toward NMD development in other kinds of humane, sustainable development option that could be given to people in the world, especially in the Marshall Islands, because the U.S. owes us option, giving us option to develop in our own term, not someone else's term. So why should we pay too much more money in technology like Star Wars, where we can take all that money and helping people in the indigenous world so that they can adapt better and they can develop in their own term and not someone else's term, and work together to making sure that people practice sustainability within a culture, within the values that is dear to the heart of many people in the third world or in the Marshall Islands. So I think there should be more focus away from NMD development into sustainability of people's culture and their way of practice development in their own term. Citizen resistance to Star Wars has been very encouraging. The effort really has reached the grassroots level, particularly among Marshallese people. We have seen, as I've said earlier, we've seen educated young college and graduated students have come back with new ideas, with new kind of values in which they have embraced during their education away from the islands. And so it's within these kind of people that we have put our trust in, who have actually questioned the idea of not only development, but questioned the idea of why should we be sacrificing our environmental integrity for the so-called, peace for all, for military imposed peace, which has not worked, as we all know it, and that there's more and more people are becoming more aware of it, and I hope that that's the case. And for Marshallese, I think that's a very hopeful trend, and we've seen a lot of people coming back and embrace the idea of resistance for something that has happened in the past, and we don't want to happen again.